All right, what's going on, everyone? Bryce Gelman here today for my annual Ideal Knicks offseason. I'm going to be getting into who I want them to hire as the new head coach. It is now Thursday, June 26th. The second round of the NBA draft starts in just a few hours. I'm going to be getting into my draft targets. It's not very in-depth. Again, the second round is in a few hours here. There hasn't been much information out about who the Knicks are really interested in. We know who they've worked out. We know that they have interest in trading up to maybe a pick in the 30s. As of right now, they have the 50th pick in the draft. So obviously all that remains to be seen. And lastly, I'm going to get into my ideal free agent targets. Only three. I mean, you see people doing a 10-man list. I'm going to get to my top three. Obviously, the likelihood of each one of them varies, but I will get to that in just a little bit. But without further ado, let's get this started. The Knicks offseason, this is an essential offseason. I think that last year you kind of got all the big moves that you wanted to make out of the way. You made two home run plays in terms of trading for Karl-Anthony Towns, trading for Mikal Bridges. Of course, that package they gave up for Mikal Bridges, you can argue whether or not that was the right move. We can do an entire video on that, and I'm assuming at some point I'm going to revisit that trade because it doesn't seem like the Knicks are too high on Mikal Bridges. Doesn't seem like they look at that trade very favorably, no matter what fans want to tell you, no matter what the media wants to tell you. So they obviously made the big moves they needed to make last season. We're not looking at this year as like, all right, they need to change things up. Like, this is the core of the roster. Whether they trade one of these guys, I don't think that there's a high likelihood of that. I think the one guy you could see traded is Mikal Bridges. I don't think any one of those other guys are unsafe when it comes to staying on this Knicks team or not. So they have a lot of holes to address right now. We saw some of their flaws exposed specifically in that series against the Pacers, one of them being the lack of offensive creator off the bench, the lack of facilitator off the bench, the lack of a point guard who can come in and take the brunt of the playmaking load off of Jalen Brunson. It seemed like a lot of times at the end of games, Jalen Brunson was slightly run down, and maybe that was because he had to bring the ball up the majority of the time. The times they went with Mikal Bridges, the times they went with Josh Hart, these guys are unable to facilitate. You have them taking up the ball. All these plays and all these picks off ball are being run for Jalen Brunson just to get the ball after the Knicks cross half court. And what's the point of that? You need another guy who could come in, facilitate, find the open man. Tyler Kolek could be that guy. I don't know if the Knicks trust him yet at this point. So if you're looking for a stopgap guy, I really recommend the Knicks go after some of the guys that I'm going to get into. I've got one guy particularly in mind to fill that void, but that's just one of the holes the Knicks need to fill. Another one is a backup big. It seems like Precious Achiuwa was signed a 1-year, $6 million deal last offseason. It doesn't seem like the Knicks are going to re-sign him. I don't think that they're going to want to use the mid-level exception, the taxpayer mid-level exception they have, which is a max like $5.5 billion. I don't see the Knicks using that on Precious Achiuwa out of all people. Maybe he wants to take a veteran's minimum. I doubt it. I think he might be a little disgruntled from last year, his role there. Maybe a new head coach comes in. Maybe they have a sit-down with Precious Achiuwa. Maybe they're like, hey, listen, Tom Thibodeau refused to play you. I look at you as this type of player that Tom Thibodeau did. I don't know. That's the other question mark if the Knicks don't have a head coach going into the draft. And that's another story for another day. I don't necessarily know if the coach would change the philosophy behind who the front office wants to draft, but I digress. So the Knicks, obviously, they need a backup big, whether it is to play alongside Mitchell Robinson or to play alongside Karl-Anthony Towns. I think that there are a bunch of guys who fit that mold, a few of them in the draft, a few of them potentially in free agency. But that is another hole they need to fill. And last but not least is they need a creator off the bench. They need someone who can come in, create his own shot. There was one guy on this Knicks roster. It's not hyperbole. One guy on this Knicks roster who you could trust to create his own shot, and that's Jalen Brunson. Yes, Karl-Anthony Towns is a freak of nature on the offensive end. Yes, he can blow by his defender. Do you trust him to take a step back? Do you trust him to find an open look on the perimeter? No. And the Knicks, for whatever reason, I mean, Tom Thibodeau obviously, is to blame for this. The Knicks refused to set off-ball screens for Karl-Anthony Towns to get him open, to get him, space to do what he does best, to shoot threes. In the playoffs, he only took 4.5, 4.2, whatever the number was. It was under 5 threes a game. Guys shooting over 42% from three. It made no sense at the time. to me, and I don't think it makes any sense to not utilize the one best strength of your second best offensive player, and that's having him take as many threes as possible. So the Knicks need another guy who can get into the paint or create his own shot. Obviously, if he can create his own shot, the defenses are going to respect that. They're going to play out on him, and they're going to allow potential open lanes if that said player is able to blow by his defender. You know what that creates? It creates open looks for the Knicks shooters. So many times throughout the playoffs, we saw the lack of offensive creation outside Jalen Brunson. It was very difficult to watch. OG Anunoby was probably second best in that. Mikal Bridges with the fadeaway jumper. That's it. That's all he could do. How many shots was he creating on the perimeter? The Knicks need a perimeter creator offensively. So that's another important hole to fill. I think those are the top three in terms of things that the Knicks need. So now let's get into my draft targets here. Again, I told you this isn't very in depth. I think we've heard who the Knicks have worked out. I don't necessarily think that means a lot for who they're going to draft. But let's get into it. I think that there are a couple trade up options. You've seen some reports the Knicks are interested in trading up to a pick in the 30s, mid 30s, early 30s. I don't know specifically what pick they're looking to trade up to, but I think based off that rumor, it looks like the Knicks are trying to get someone who's extremely well established in his college career. He's a senior, he's a super senior, a guy who could come in and contribute immediately. You obviously give up less capital. With the draft picks, a potential player, I don't think the Knicks are going to trade any player in order to trade up in the draft. The salaries are not going to match unless the Knicks want to go out there and get a better player, or not necessarily a better player, but get a player in return alongside the pick. I don't see that as a high likelihood right now. But I think the Knicks go out and get an NBA ready guy. They did that last year with Tyler Kolek. I understand they also took a younger prospect and Become Dadier earlier on in the draft, but that's it. It's as good of it's basically a draft and stash. You draft him, he sits on the bench. They thought there was a chance that he goes back to Europe and plays there. He says, no, I want to come to the States. Fine, so be it. Okay, that's okay. That's cool. But you're going to sit on the bench. You're going to learn for 2 to 3 years. That is a long-term project. I don't think the Knicks go that route here. If they want to trade up, it's going to be to get a guy who can contribute immediately. Because as I was saying, the Knicks' best chance of getting a player who can contribute right now within the cap space they have is through the draft. Through the draft. And you give up the least amount to get said player, to essentially sign them for veterans minimum. So I got 2 trade-up targets. I like Tyrese Proctor from Duke. I think the Knicks, as I mentioned, they need a shooter. I was going to get to that. That's my fourth option. The playmaker, the shot creator, the big man, and I think this could arguably be number 2 in there. Is a 3-point shooter. It is someone who could space the floor, a guy who could come in off the bench. Landry Shamet wasn't that guy, or at least the Knicks didn't utilize him like that. He's a good shooter. Is he an amazing catch and shoot 3-point shooter? Is he lights out from deep? He never was that. He never was. So you want to look at him as, the barometer of what the Knicks are going to do. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to get into that. I'd like to bring back Landry Shamet on this team. I'm going to get to that. But I think the Knicks need to go after a guy who could shoot the 3 well. I like Tyrese Proctor. I like Kobe Brea from Kentucky. Obviously, the connections between the Knicks and Kentucky in the past. It's kind of shifted over to the connections and ties with Villanova. But I think that in that spot, if they trade up, they're going to be looking for a guy who can really shoot the ball well, or a wing who's got some size here. But the Knicks are interested also, we've heard, in Jameer Watkins from Florida State. I don't think that he's going to get to 50, or at least that is what people have reported. And other teams think that he's not going to get to 50, presumably because they have interest in Jameer Watkins. But Jameer Watkins is 6'6" guard. He's got size. That's very important. If the Knicks are looking to get either a shot creator or a facilitator off the bench, you kind of want that player to be able to play alongside Jalen Brunson. As I'm saying, if Jalen Brunson's in the game, you need scoring. You need, as much offensive firepower as you possibly can get. You need a combo guard in the backcourt next to Jalen Brunson. And what's the main reason why the Knicks didn't trade for Donovan Mitchell? I think mainly because Danny Ainge was asking for the moon and the stars when it came to that return, but also because Donovan Mitchell is an undersized guard. And yes, he plays a lot bigger than he is, but defensively, you need a big guard if you want to play them next to Jalen Brunson. And I think that whichever head coach takes over is going to want to do that because it just makes sense. Mikal Bridges on his own is not good enough facilitator. And he's not a guy who's going to blow past the defender. He's a guy who's going to post up. He's like Michael Jordan. If Michael Jordan only did post-ups and fadeaways. That was a very small part of his game. He had a lot more than that. And most great players in the NBA have a huge bag of moves they can go to at any point. Mikal Bridges is the fadeaway jumper and the mid-range jumper and the three-point from the corner. Nothing else. So the Knicks need another guy, combo guard who could score well and create his own shot. So that's why you see the Knicks interested in Jameer Watkins. Jameer Watkins, a guard, as I mentioned, 6'6", who averaged 18.4 points per game, 5.7 rebounds, and 1.2 steals. I don't think that, there are obviously rumors about the Knicks, working out a bunch of other guys. You got this guy, Adouth Tiero. I got to figure out how to pronounce that, especially if the Knicks draft him, from Arkansas, and Jonathan Pierre from Belmont. Those two guys, reported by Chris Bersianen, who I had on last week to talk about, front office stuff. And I didn't just have him on to tell me what he's been reporting on. Not to say I don't trust Chris. He's put out a lot of good information. None of it has been untrue. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's not a reputable reporter that has sources within the Knicks organization. But I think that we have a different mindset about this process, the head coaching process. So we talked about that. I kind of pushed back on some of his claims about this being an amazing process and they're doing their due diligence. But check that out. That was last week or the week before. That was some very good stuff with Chris, who's amazing. So he's reported the Knicks have interest in Tiero and Belmont's Jonathan Pierre. So listen, we'll see. I just personally don't think the Knicks are going to be prioritizing getting a big man. They've worked out a few of them. They drafted Ariel Hukporti, and he showed some flashes of being a really good screen and roll guy. Something that Karl-Anthony Towns could really learn something from. Like in the limited action that he got, he seems like 10 times the player of Karl-Anthony Towns in terms of being the roll man in the pick and roll. So I like what I've seen from Ariel Hukporti. There's no guarantee that whichever head coach takes over the reins is going to trust him enough. Being that backup big, you'd obviously love to see it. And Ariel Hukporti has a team option. I assume the Knicks are going to pick that up because of the flashes that we saw. They took him at the end of the second round last year. And he showed some promise. So I don't think that the Knicks are best served using whichever pick, whether it be with the 50th pick or then moving up on a big man. I don't think that makes much sense. I think there are better options out there, which I'm going to get to in the free agent market. And again, I think that they might trust Ariel Hukporti. I don't know. It just kind of sucks the Knicks are drafting tonight in the second round without a head coach. Who knows? By the time you see this, they may have a head coach. You're going to know who they drafted. I'm going to get this out immediately. And I'll put timestamps down at the bottom if you want to skip this part and you want to get to, the meat and bones of this episode, the stuff that I'm looking forward to talking about the most. And that's my head coaching candidates, my top ones. And then after that, as mentioned before, my top three free agent targets for the Knicks. Ideal. But I just don't see them going for a big man in this spot. Again, I think the Knicks are going to trade up for a shooter or a big wing. I mean, like a guy that I like a lot is John Tonje of Wisconsin, bigger player, 6'8". Wisconsin had a really good offense last year. I follow Wisconsin. I used to be a big fan, and I didn't get into Wisconsin, so I kind of not a fan, but I still follow a lot of their accounts. So I see a lot of, the stuff they put out there. And this guy is big. This guy was like the engine behind the Wisconsin offense, which, these Wisconsin teams, they were different under Bo Ryan. Now with Greg Gard, at the helm of Wisconsin. They're well fundamental. A lot of these guys, questionable whether or not they have success. Johnny Davis, whatever happened there, that was a disaster. But you could trust these guys to come out of college, especially if they played a bunch of years at Wisconsin. Johnny Davis obviously, did not play as much at Wisconsin, but I think that. Listen, I don't think the Knicks are going to go out there and draft a big. I think that they're going to draft a wing or a guy who could shoot. I think that's just the smartest move. So I'm not going to. I just gave you a few options. I don't know who the Knicks are going to take. I'm not a draft guru. It's definitely not my area of expertise, but I put some research in. And those guys, again, a couple of them have been worked out by the Knicks, and a couple of them are just other guys that I think the Knicks would be smart in taking. I love Tyrese Proctor from Duke, a guy who could shoot the ball well from three, high clip. But let's get into what I'm looking forward to most talking about, and that's the guys that I want the Knicks to hire at head coach. And you've now seen 4 head coaches interview. Mike Brown. 4 as of now. Mike Brown, Taylor Jenkins, Mike Inori, and James Borrego. And correct me down in the comments if I'm missing one. But those are the guys the Knicks interviewed as of 3:30 on June 26th. Now, you may think, I'm not going to do this. I mean, I talked about it a million times in the live streams that I've been doing that I'm not a huge fan of the process. I wasn't a huge fan of why Tom Thibodeau, who was behind the Tom Thibodeau firing. That's another story that I've discussed on another day. But I think that this process, the due diligence people are saying, I don't think they have any idea what the hell they're doing. I think they're throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. But there are a few guys out there that I prefer. And you may be saying to me, Bryce, why don't the Knicks go out and hire someone who's already established as a head coach in the league? Why don't the Knicks go out there and hire Johnny Bryant? And I'll tell you what I think about both of those ideas. A lot of these guys the Knicks are interviewing or, plan on interviewing, specifically Mike Brown and Taylor Jenkins, got fired not as a result of a few down seasons. Borrego, yes, he was fired because of a couple down seasons. He didn't even know the last time the Hornets won or were over 500. James Borrego was the head coach. But the thing with Brown and Taylor Jenkins, they lost the respect of the locker room. Mike Brown, De'Aaron Fox may have been behind all that. He said publicly that he wasn't. He had no prior knowledge. And of course, De'Aaron Fox was traded just weeks later. So maybe there's some truth to that. But Mike Brown was largely fired because of his criticism publicly of his team. And he said a lot after a really bad loss. I want to say it was De'Aaron Fox at the end of that game. It was one game where the Kings were up 2, and it was De'Aaron. He closed out on a 3-point shooter and allowed the guy to drive right past him to tie the game. And obviously the Kings ended up losing that game. And then the next day, I believe it was the next day, that Mike Brown was fired. So clearly he lost the respect of the locker room. Taylor Jenkins, fired just before the playoffs. Head coach of the Grizzlies. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that their locker room and they've got immature guys. Ja Morant, you could say whatever you want about him. He's been in the media a lot because of his celebrations and the gun stuff. And again, you could create your own, come to your own conclusions when it comes to Ja Morant, the type of guy he is, not necessarily the player. He's a very talented guy. I think every Knicks fan hoped that they got the second pick instead of the third pick of the 2019 draft and ended up with Ja instead of RJ Barrett. The talent is undeniable, but there's clearly a maturity thing going on that has taken a lot of criticism, a lot of punishment from the NBA for him to finally, hopefully, learn his lesson. He threw a grenade after Taylor Jenkins fired. And when someone gets fired that late in the season, it's because clearly there's some discord going on, whether it be with the front office and the head coach, or the players and the head coach. He was canned. So the two first guys the Knicks interviewed are guys in which lost the locker room. And I'm racking my brain to try to find guys who were fired as a direct result of losing respect among their players. And I find it very hard to come up with names where that happened and they were hired by another team and they had success. One of the names that comes to mind is David Blatt, who was fired in the middle of the 2016 season. It's a different story. LeBron James, most powerful player in the league, even back then in 2016, he was fired. Tyronn Lue promoted to head coach, and the Cavs won a championship. Where the hell has David Blatt been? Where's David Blatt? Pretty sure he went back to Europe. Had no future in the NBA. That's just one of the names that comes to mind. I'm sure there are plenty of other examples here, but those are the two guys that the Knicks interviewed first. And I just don't see a likelihood in which a guy that wasn't totally respected by the last team that they coached, it's just not a good sign. And it's not something that I think could lend itself to being successful in a different. I don't think it's like an environment thing. I mean, maybe a few immature players forced the guy out. I think that was the case with David Blatt when it comes to LeBron, but clearly they had success after, and David Blatt went into hiding, never to be seen or heard from again. So I don't think that those two guys are good options. James Borrego, I wouldn't hate if the Knicks hired him. I wouldn't. As I mentioned, the last time the Hornets were even remotely successful was when James Borrego was at the helm, a great offensive head coach. I think that's what the Knicks need, based off the current construction of the roster. They need a guy who specializes in offense and a guy who also isn't incompetent defensively. I don't want them to hire a Mike D'Antoni, guy who knows nothing about defense. But I think that there are other good options that the Knicks haven't interviewed yet that I like. And one of the guys that I do like, because this is my thought process, and I've said all this to get to this point, I do not want the Knicks to hire a former head coach. We have seen throughout the past few years in the NBA, teams that are not necessarily rebuilding, but teams that have a certain level of pedigree, teams that have high expectations or have higher expectations, whether it be in the coming year or a couple years after that, a few years after, 3-4 years, those teams have gone out and hired assistant head coaches. The two teams that come to mind are the last two world champions, with Mark Daigneault this year and Joe Mazzulla. I think I've talked about this before. The Mazzulla situation is a little bit different than Mark Daigneault. Mark Daigneault was hired when the team was not good. They obviously had a lot of promise, a lot of picks going forward. They didn't necessarily know what they had with Jalen Williams. Chet Holmgren was very injury prone at the time, missed his rookie year. But there was the expectation from Mark Daigneault. Listen, this franchise is up and coming. You're going to have some leeway. You're going to have a larger leash than maybe a head coach of a team in a tight window with the current CBA does. But these guys are expected to improve and blossom under you. And boy, did those guys do that. So that's why I bring him up. And Joe Mazzulla, whatever happened with Ime Udoka, you know what happened. He gets suspended for a year, ends up leaving. Joe Mazzulla, an assistant off his bench, very young guy, unproven, not an assistant coach for a very long time, was a college coach, coached other leagues. He is promoted, and then the Celtics win a championship. They win a championship. And you saw with the limitations that Tom Thibodeau, the Knicks had with Tom Thibodeau as their head coach, and they still got within 2 games of the NBA Finals. And there are a lot of people out there, a lot of talking heads, Frank Isola being one of them. Another one, Brian Scalabrine too, Brian Geltzeiler, all these guys on Sirius XM NBA radio. other talking heads on ESPN, they did not like the firing of Tom Thibodeau. They thought that Tom Thibodeau gave them the ceiling that the Knicks have not had in a very long time. And credit where credit is due, he helped lead the Knicks there, but offensively, their talents were not maximized. So you saw it with the Celtics hiring Joe Mazzulla as his assistant coach. I understand that's a different situation. They were head and shoulders the best team in the league. But it's a similar situation. The Knicks have high expectations. The Celtics had even higher expectations at the time, getting to the finals 2 years before. So here we are now. With the high expectations. You may say, well, you bring in a former head coach, and that former head coach has the experience. He'll be able to deal with the pressure, the expectations better than an assistant coach. I don't believe that. I want a guy, an assistant coach who's beloved by the locker room, who has yet to have a chance to prove himself. There's a chip on that coach's shoulder. And the two guys I have in mind, one of them the Knicks interviewed. The only assistant coach the Knicks have interviewed. That's Micah Norrie. A guy who's been the assistant coach in the league for 18 years. He's proven himself now as the associate head coach of the Timberwolves the last 5 seasons. And has been part of the reason why this Timberwolves team has completely turned around their fortunes. 2 Western Conference Finals appearances in a row. Chris Finch is the head coach. I understand Micah Norrie is the assistant coach. But what happened last year in the playoffs? Chris Finch blew up his knee in a collision with Mike Conley. Micah Norrie ended up finishing that game, and then after that, Chris Finch sat on the bench, was the de facto head coach, but the guy on the floor coaching the players, yelling at the players, calling out plays, was Micah Norrie. And obviously he had input behind him from the head coach and Chris Finch, but he's the one who was on the sideline. And again, the Timberwolves made the Western Conference Finals. I love Micah Norrie. I've heard a bunch of his interviews. He's been very generous to my employer, SiriusXM NBA Radio. He's been very generous to our morning show, the starting lineup, and their producers and the hosts. And he's just like, he's beloved. You've heard some stuff from Anthony Edwards saying, I love the man, or whatever the hell he said. It was very favorable of Micah Norrie. It's a guy who's beloved by the locker room. The Knicks need someone like that who commands the respect of the locker room. And Micah Norrie, he's paid his dues. He has been mentioned in multiple coaching searches. I think it's inevitability that he gets a head coaching position in the league. I think the Knicks should be the team that gives it to him. My second option is Sam Cassell, a guy who became a head coach, assistant coach in the exact year that Micah Norrie became an assistant coach. Sam Cassell won a championship in 2008 with the Celtics. The next year became an assistant coach in the NBA. 18 years as an assistant head coach. Most recently, now with the Celtics, helping Joe Mazzulla with the transition into becoming a head coach, which obviously is difficult when you're that young. These two guys are established as assistant coaches. I don't necessarily think they need as much help as Joe Mazzulla did at the time. Sam Cassell was known as one of the, and also I think the Knicks and James Dolan are looking for a guy who's been established, whether it be as a player or as a coach. I don't think they'll hire a no-name guy like Johnny Bryant. Listen, I think he's established as an assistant coach in the league, but he is kind of a no-name. Wasn't a player. I'm not saying Micah Norrie was as well, but I think that, Micah Norrie has paid his dues, and that's the difference that I see between him and Johnny Bryant. But Sam Cassell, the same amount of time as the assistant coach. Literally jumped into it the second after he won a championship. Didn't go into the media. Didn't do anything. He has been an assistant coach ever since. And he's a player, and he was a player. He's a coach now who's widely respected around the league. And he's the type of guy, as assistant coach, who has never had a chance to prove himself as a head coach in the league, who can come in and deal with the pressure. Because he has experience, a lot of experience, as an assistant coach in the league. So those are my top 2 options. Now I've done 30 minutes on my draft guys and who I want them to hire as head coach. I think Sam Cassell would be an amazing hire. I think Micah Norrie would be an amazing hire. There you go. I know I just did plenty on that, but let's move on. Let's talk. And it's a good thing that I'm only doing 3 options here. If it was more, this may be an hour video. But I want to talk about the 3 guys that I think would be most ideal in terms of signing this year. I think all three of them are realistic. The first option is less realistic than the next two because this first player is a Clutch Sports represented player. And if you know the Knicks, you know that there are plenty of ties between them and CAA, and not many ties between them and Clutch Sports. I don't believe that anyone on the Knicks roster is represented by Clutch. And you kind of heard last year, I think February, March, where supposedly Leon Rose and Rich Paul wiped the slate clean. Buried the hatchet. That obviously hasn't amounted to anything. That the Knicks still have not signed anyone from Clutch. So that remains to be seen. It could have been a farce. I don't know. But this Knicks team right now, I mentioned it before. What are the three things they need? I mentioned four. Some of these guys fit, multiple molds here, but I think number one is a guy who can come in, a combo guard who can create his own shot, who's a good three-point shooter. My number one option is Gary Trent Jr., a guy that last year signed for the veterans minimum. He signed a 3-year, $50 million extension with the Raptors in 2021 that ran out after the 2023 season. And then he signed with the Bucks, maybe to ring chase, maybe to prove his value in the NBA again, and took that veterans minimum. And the Bucks, I didn't have any hope in them throughout the entire year, even last year as well. I've never liked the makeup of their team with Giannis alongside an aging Damian Lillard. The rest of the roster doesn't make up for the flaws that both those guys have as a tandem. Gary Trent Jr., that was an amazing signing. They looked at that, okay, here's another offensive option besides our top two guys. He could score in bunches. He's averaged 14 points per game throughout his career. He shoots the ball at a high clip, at least from three. I would love Gary Trent Jr. I think, from what I've seen, he's projected to fetch $8 to $10 million a year in free agency. The Knicks have access to their taxpayer mid-level exception, which is around $5.7 million, I believe. The only thing with signing to someone to that mid-level exception is it puts them into the second apron. It makes certain moves a lot harder to complete because every trade you make, you need to be receiving 100%, exactly 100% of what the other team is giving you. You need to send out 100% of what the team is giving. And it becomes very difficult to maneuver in the second apron. And, of course, the tax goes up. That's not an issue with James Dolan. He has signaled to, both his team and the media the times that, he's spoken, also just the moves he's made by signing Phil Jackson, the amount of money that he did, being willing to eat 3 years and $30 million that the Knicks owe Tom Thibodeau now. He has proven to be willing to spend in order to make the Knicks successful. I think he sticks his nose into a lot of situations and in turn does not help the Knicks win. But in terms of money, in terms of spending, he's all in. I think that he'll be willing to pay the luxury tax that the Knicks will inevitably have to pay if they go into the second apron. So Gary Trent Jr., he's not a veteran's minimum target. I think signing him to the mid-level exception is a little bit more realistic. As I mentioned, he is a Clutch Sports represented guy. I don't know. I don't know what can come of that. I don't know if there's a blacklist. Again, like I mentioned, Leon Rose and Rich Paul wiped the slate clean. We don't know much past that. Gary Trent Jr., listen, I don't know how realistic it is because of that prior beef, but he's a guy, he averaged 11 points per game this past season. He also played the least amount of minutes that he's played in his career since his second year in the career. And I think that's, that was a given going to the Bucks. And it was the first time that he really didn't have a major offensive role. He had a big role throughout the early 2020s with the Raptors. And there's a reason why he was signed to that extension, 3 years, $50 million. He averaged 11 points per game, shot 41.6% from three. As I mentioned, on the lowest minutes per game, there wasn't necessarily the volume shooting-wise that you'd seen earlier on in his career. He's a below-average defender. You're not going to get the 3 and D that you might want. I mean, those types of players command a lot of money in free agency. Those types of players are not realistic targets for the Knicks with the lack of money that they have. With their top 6 players having 93%, covering 93% of the available cap space the Knicks had. So I'd like to see Gary Trent Jr. brought in the mid-level exception. He ring chased last year. The Knicks have the second best odds or the third best odds, no matter, I don't know which sports book you're looking at, but the second or third best odds to win a championship. If you really want a ring chase, you come to the Knicks. If you really want a chance to thrive in the Knicks system and fill a much needed hole the Knicks need to fill, then you come to the Knicks. If you want to be an impactful guy off the bench, the Knicks need volume scoring off the bench like we need oxygen. And he fits two of those, he fills two of those holes. In terms of shot creation off the bench, which the Knicks need so desperately, and the ability to knock down threes at a high clip, 41.6%. That would have ranked second on the Knicks this season behind Karl-Anthony Towns, who shot around 42% from three. No one else, with enough volume, was able to match Karl-Anthony Towns or, exceed him on the roster. And I think whichever head coach that comes in and whatever strategy they have offensively, I think that the coach will realize very early on that it doesn't make much sense to play Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson 25, 30 minutes a game on the floor together. They're two offensive liabilities. And if they sign someone like Gary Trent Jr., who's a below average defender, I think he had around, I believe, a 114 defensive rating last year. So again, a below average defender. And I just, a new head coach, I don't believe would play him with Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. So whichever one he plays with, they're going to have a backup option in terms of shot creation. A guy who could bring the ball up. Gary Trent Jr. Fits that mold the Knicks need. Number two, someone who is arguably one of the most consistent players in NBA history over this long of a period of time, and second oldest player in the NBA is Al Horford, a guy who's crushed the Knicks in the past. No matter what team he's been on, regular season, postseason, he's killed the Knicks. And he's a guy in which, still at his old age, again, the second oldest player in the NBA, can still knock down threes. He has not once in his career played less over a season than 26.8 minutes per game. Speaking about that, that's consistency right there. That's consistency. Shot 42% from three 2 years ago, 36% this past year. There were a bunch of injuries for the Celtics. They didn't have the spacing they did the year before. He still played 27, over 27 minutes per game. That's the type of player, the type of versatility you need in a backup big. Because not only can he space the floor, and when the Knicks went out and traded Karl-Anthony Towns, the best offensive scheme that they would be able to run would be the 5-out offense, which Tom Thibodeau refused to do, even though the front office traded for Karl-Anthony Towns, and that's the intention was behind that. It was, as much spacing as possible. So I think that the Knicks, if the plan is to do that, and I think whichever head coach they're going to bring in, that's going to be their plan. I think that's what the front office wants to do. You're going to need spacing. And Al Horford, alongside Karl-Anthony Towns, is going to take a lot of the defensive load off of Karl-Anthony Towns in defending the paint, and defending the pick and roll, which he's unbelievably inept at and clearly frustrated multiple guys in the locker room because of that. So that's something that will be able to help Karl-Anthony Towns. Also, you could play him alongside Mitchell Robinson. Mitch is the 5, Al Horford as the 4, someone who could still space the floor, and someone who's a very versatile player. Like, the Knicks don't have anyone who could set screens. And like in big games, Mitch Robinson, even in the last 2 minutes of each quarter, comes and sets a screen, you just foul him. Doesn't shoot well enough from the free throw line to justify having him be the screener on every single pick and roll throughout, the most important stretches of games or quarters. Al Horford could fit that mold right there. And that's, again, a guy who could shoot, very versatile. I know he's in the twilight of his career, but every time people have counted out Al Horford, he has responded in a way that no one expected them to. So my last option is someone that I believe is one of the most underrated players in the game, and that's Tyus Jones, someone who last year signed a veteran's minimum with the Suns. He's exactly who the Knicks need as a backup point guard. He's efficient. Over the last 2 years, he's an average of a 6-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. The Knicks last year were a team that did not turn the ball over a lot, mainly because they assisted a lot, but they didn't have a backup facilitator. Campaign was never that guy. I think that the Knicks are going to become a much more offensively sound team if they have a good backup point guard. Deuce McBride is not that guy. He's not a facilitator. He is what the team needs in terms of like 5-out spacing. And I think that he's on one of, if not the best contract in the NBA. But he's not good enough in terms of a playmaker to justify playing him more than 20, 25 minutes a game. And there will be times when these backup guards can be trusted to play that much, especially under a non-Tom Thibodeau coach team. Tyus Jones off the bench not with saying inability. He turns the ball over every once in a while, but with his amazing, I'm going to say amazing, assist to turnover ratio is a guy you could trust to come in and facilitate. He's also shot 41.4% from three these last 2 years, each year. He'd be an amazing fit with this Knicks team. Like, I know I rank them 1, 2, 3. I think you could interchange any one of these guys. I don't think it's in any specific order. Man, I love the Knicks got Tyus Jones. I feel like that's exactly what they need at this point. And I don't think he proved enough in order to get a larger contract. Maybe he's the one that you want to sign to the mid-level exception if the Gary Trent Jr. pipe dream doesn't come to fruition. Maybe that makes sense. I don't know. I'd like to think that after what he did last year, and I understand that there was more of a role available for him. And I know that, the Suns so desperately needed a point guard. He started a lot of games for them, but he wants to be on a championship contender team. Come to Pop. Please come to the Knicks. That is someone that the Knicks desperately need. They need a backup playmaker. Campaign's gone. See ya. They have a lot of decisions to make with their backup guys. I want Landry Shamet back. I want DeLon Wright back, but veterans minimums. You can't give the mid-level exception to either one of those guys. They're not good enough. Obviously, I don't think they were given enough time and enough chances to prove themselves, with neither of them getting any meaningful minutes throughout the postseason until Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals. They were guys that came in and did a serviceable job off the bench, and I think for that reason they deserve a chance to prove themselves in another season with a head coach that it will be more willing to play them. Those are two guys I want back. They will help a lot with depth. They are not guys that you can rely on to fill the voids the Knicks need to fill. And that's consistent catch and shoot, 3-point shooting. Another guy is Luke Kennard. I've seen linked to the Knicks. I think, there's a lot of value for a guy like that in the league, and maybe he's not willing to take as little as the mid-level exception or veterans minimum. That's another guy that would fit that mold. And those guys are not playmakers. Like DeLon Wright can bring the ball up. He makes some good passes, but he's a better defender than he is on offense. And again, like the Knicks also need a backup big, and like the Knicks are going to need to go out and acquire someone like that. I love Al Horford. He's been, people have made a lot. You obviously haven't heard anything. You haven't heard anything in terms of what the Knicks have been interested in. I think maybe they've been focusing too much on finding a head coach, or they've been focused more on the draft. You've heard obviously reports about who they're interested in the draft, but nothing about free agency. But any one of those three guys, and I'll be thrilled. Any one of those three guys, alongside another guy, I'd like to see someone else besides DeLon Wright and Landry Shamet signed to a veteran's minimum contract. And then also I'd like to see the mid-level exception used. Because I think that the benefits of signing someone like that who can come in and play meaningful minutes, it's got to be someone who is worth more and is willing to take a little bit of a discount to play for the Knicks. If it's someone who you think should be earning the middle level, you should be earning a veteran's minimum, you don't sign him to the mid-level exception. I think the positives of that outweigh the negatives of being in the second neighbor. I trust Brock Aller to do whatever the hell he does in order to, to increase their financial I don't I trust him to take the Knicks out of tough spots they'll be in cap wise. Last year, they had that amazing loophole, found the amazing loophole that had the entire league in shock. So I trust Brock Aller to do whatever the hell he does best. But that'll do it. That'll do it. I know I just went really long. I didn't expect to go 45 minutes here. Covered a lot of ground. If anything happens in terms of the head coaching hire, or anything crazy happens in the draft tonight, I will be covering it tomorrow. This will be released in no time on my YouTube channel. And then tomorrow I'll be doing something else to recap the draft or yada, yada, yada. I'll be talking more Knicks. Promise you, there's still a lot. The season's over. It's been almost a month since the Knicks lost in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. The news has not stopped. This head coaching search and upcoming free agency, but then for trades they can make, it will go on and on and on. And best be sure that I'll be bringing you all the analysis, have some guests on. Chris Persianen, I'll be doing a live stream with him very soon. So stay tuned for that. I'll have some more guests, and you know the deal. You know the deal. So stay tuned for all that's coming. More Yankee stuff, more Giant stuff, as always. My podcast, One Giant Step, with Sean Morash. So stay tuned. That's all I got for today. I'll talk to you all very soon.